They won't tell you these rules. They won't even admit them to themselves, but they live by them. Every relationship they enter, every bond they form, is shaped by these silent rules. Rules that don't come written down. Rules that no one has spoken out loud. Rules born from fear, from survival, from wounds they don't want you to see. And if you've ever loved an avoidant, you felt these rules press against you. You felt them control the closeness. You felt them pull away just when you thought you were finally safe. The avoidant doesn't say, "I follow rules in love." But they do. And the rules are powerful, invisible, and often heartbreaking. They won't say it out loud. But the first rule an avoidant lives by is this: never need too much. Not from anyone. Not ever. On the surface, it looks admirable. It looks like independence, strength, self-sufficiency. They seem like the person who can carry their own weight, handle their problems, stand on their own 2 feet, move through life without leaning on anyone. And people often praise them for it. They get called strong. They get admired for being independent. Friends might even say, "I wish I could be more like you. So unbothered, so stable." But what looks like strength on the outside is often fear on the inside. Because for the avoidant, to need is to risk. To ask is to expose. To depend is to open the door to disappointment. This rule didn't appear out of nowhere. It was born in childhood, carved into their nervous system long before they ever dated anyone. Maybe when they were small, they reached for comfort and no one came. Maybe they cried and their cries went unanswered. Maybe they needed love and instead they got silence, distance, or rejection. A child can only learn so many times that love doesn't come before they stop asking. So the avoidant learned, if I need too much, I'll be let down. If I depend, I'll be hurt. If I ask, I'll be shamed. And slowly, they built a survival strategy, a way to protect themselves, a way to keep the pain away. They stopped asking. They stopped needing. They stopped hoping. That's how the rule was born, not as a conscious choice, but as armor. And now, as adults, they live by it without even knowing. Watch how it plays out. You tell them, "I miss you." To you, it's love. To them, it's need. And need feels dangerous. You ask, "Can you be there for me?" To you, it's closeness. To them, it's pressure. And pressure feels suffocating. You say, "I need you." To you, it's intimacy. To them, it's risk. And risk feels unbearable. So they pull away. Not because they don't care. Not because they don't feel. But because your need activates their rule. The rule whispers inside them. Don't rely. Don't lean. Don't trust. Keep yourself safe by keeping yourself separate. If you don't need, you can't be hurt. But here's the tragedy. This rule doesn't just protect them. It isolates them. Because love requires need. Connection requires leaning. Intimacy requires dependence. And when they follow the rule, they cut themselves off from the very thing they secretly long for. Think about it. The child inside them never stopped needing. That child still wants closeness, still wants warmth, still wants someone to say, "You don't have to carry this alone." But every time that child stirs, the adult avoidant silences it. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They keep conversations surface level. They hide behind work, hobbies, or independence. They say, "I'm fine." They say, "I don't need anything." They say, "I'm okay on my own." And maybe they even believe it. For a while. Until loneliness creeps in late at night. Until they realize that being strong has also meant being alone. Let's go deeper. When you love someone who lives by this rule, you'll notice patterns. They're the partner who doesn't reach for your hand. They're the one who changes the subject when the conversation gets vulnerable. They're the one who says, I just need space, when what you really wanted was closeness. You might start to question yourself. Am I asking too much? Am I too needy? Am I the problem? But it's not you. It's the rule. This silent law inside them makes every need, even the smallest one, feel threatening. Now imagine the cost. Because they won't let themselves need, they won't let themselves receive. Even when love is offered freely, they push it away. Even when care is safe, they turn from it. Even when support is unconditional, they feel suffocated. It's not that they don't want love. It's that love, in their nervous system, feels like danger. Picture this. Someone holds out a glass of water to a thirsty person, but every time they reach for it, they remember the last time the water burned them. So instead, they sit in thirst, convincing themselves they don't need a drink, convincing themselves it's safer to stay dry. That's the avoidance relationship with need. They want closeness, but the memory of pain keeps them from reaching for it. So they starve themselves emotionally, and they starve the relationship too. Here's the heartbreaking paradox. The very thing they fear, need, is the very thing that makes relationships real. Because intimacy isn't just about attraction. It's not just about chemistry. It's about the willingness to depend on each other, to say, I need you, and to trust that the other person will respond. Without that, love remains shallow. Without that, relationships feel fragile. Without that, you always feel like something is missing. This is why so many people describe loving an avoidant as feeling alone in the relationship. You can be next to them, share a bed with them, spend years with them, and still feel like they're far away. Because emotionally, they are. The rule keeps them at arm's length. And that distance becomes the air you breathe together. But here's what makes it even harder. The avoidant doesn't know they're following a rule. They think this is just who they are. They think independence is natural. They think self-sufficiency is the only way to survive. They don't see that their strength is actually a scar. They don't see that their independence is actually avoidance. They don't see that what they call not needing anyone is really a fear of being let down again. And so they protect the rule. They cling to it. Because without it, they would feel naked, exposed, vulnerable. Let's make this real with a story. Imagine a child who grows up in a home where emotions are unsafe. When they cry, they're told to stop. When they ask for comfort, they're ignored. When they need love, it isn't given. That child learns very quickly, if I show need, I'll be hurt. So they stop showing. They stop asking. They stop needing. Fast forward to adulthood. Now, they're in a relationship. Their partner says, I feel distant from you. And instead of hearing a longing for closeness, they hear a threat. Instead of moving toward love, they retreat into safety. Not because they don't care, but because the rule still lives inside them. This is why relationships with avoidance often feel like chasing a ghost. You see flashes of closeness, moments where they let you in, moments where the mask slips and their heart shows. But then, almost immediately, they pull back. The rule pulls them back. Don't need. Don't ask. Don't depend. It whispers louder than your love. And you're left wondering if you imagine the connection at all. So what does this mean for you? If you love an avoidant, you're not wrong for wanting closeness. You're not too much. You're not the problem. You're simply colliding with their first rule. And until they see it, until they learn to rewrite it, this rule will always shape the relationship more than your love can. But here's the most heartbreaking cost. By living by this rule, they also betray themselves. Because deep down, every human longs for closeness. Every human needs connection. Every human wants to feel safe and loved. And the avoidant is no exception. But the very rule they live by, the rule that once kept them safe, is the same rule that keeps them from the love they long for. Never need too much. A survival strategy in childhood, a prison in adulthood, and the silent law that shapes every bond they form. The second rule is quiet, but it drives almost every move an avoidant makes in love. When things get too close, pull away. It sounds simple, but in practice, it shapes every relationship they enter. Because to the avoidant, closeness is not comfort. Closeness is danger. Closeness is risk. Let's go back for a moment. When you grew up in an environment where intimacy was safe, closeness feels natural. A hug feels warm. A listening ear feels soothing. A partner leaning on you feels good. But when you grew up in an environment where intimacy meant pain, neglect, or shame, closeness doesn't feel safe. It feels like a trap. It feels like suffocation. It feels like the moment before the rug is pulled out from under you. And that's exactly what the avoidant carries. For them, distance equals safety. Closeness equals threat. So whenever a relationship starts to deepen, they instinctively create space. Not because they don't like you, not because they don't feel anything, but because getting too real triggers the alarm bells inside them. Watch how this plays out. You start to feel like things are going well. The connection deepens. You feel closer than before. Then suddenly, they go quiet. They seem distracted. They withdraw into their own world. You wonder, did I do something wrong? But in their mind, nothing specific happened. It's simply the rule taking over. Here's how their nervous system works. Closeness activates old memories. It awakens the parts of them that once got hurt by love. It reminds them, even unconsciously, don't trust this. Don't lean in. Don't let anyone too close. So they retreat. They shut down. They make excuses. They might say, I'm just busy. They might say, I need space. They might change the subject or disappear into work, hobbies, or solitude. Anything to reestablish distance. Anything to breathe again. The closer you try to come, the more they feel the need to step back. It's not rejection. It's protection. But to you, it feels the same. Imagine this dynamic in action. You open up emotionally. You share something vulnerable. You say, I feel safe with you. Instead of leaning in, they stiffen. They don't know how to hold it. They crack a joke, change the subject, or go silent. Because to them, that moment feels overwhelming. Too real. Too close. This is why avoidants often thrive in the early stages of a relationship. When it's light, when it's fun, when it's flirty and playful. But as soon as the relationship begins to demand emotional presence, as soon as love starts to deepen into commitment, into vulnerability, into real closeness, that's when the rule activates. Pull back, create space, protect yourself. It's not that they don't want love. It's that real love requires a kind of presence they were never taught how to handle. So instead, they reach for what they know. Distance. Here's a painful irony. They often choose partners who crave closeness. Partners who want depth, honesty, and emotional intimacy. At first, the avoidant feels drawn to this. It feels exciting. It feels alive. It feels like maybe this time, things will be different. But as soon as that intimacy starts to take root, they panic. Because the very thing they were drawn to, closeness, is also the thing they fear most. So they retreat, and the cycle begins. Close, pull away. Close, pull away. Again and again. To their partner, this feels maddening, confusing, even heartbreaking. Because you feel like you're being punished for loving them, for wanting closeness, for showing care. But to the avoidant, they're not punishing you. They're protecting themselves. even if it costs the relationship. Let's dive deeper. Why does closeness feel so threatening to them? Because in their early experiences, closeness was not stable. When they reached for comfort, it wasn't always there. When they opened up, they were shut down. When they depended, they were disappointed. So their nervous system stores this association. Closeness equals pain. It doesn't matter if you're safe now. It doesn't matter if you're consistent. Their body remembers otherwise, and the body always wins. This is why logical reassurance doesn't work. You can say, "I love you. I'm not going to hurt you." And you might mean it with all your heart. But to them, those words can't override the deeper wiring, because their rule isn't based on logic. It's based on survival. And survival doesn't listen to reason. Think of it this way. If someone burned their hand on a stove as a child, their body would flinch every time they got close to a flame, even decades later. Even if you told them, "This flame is safe," their reflex wouldn't just disappear. That's how the avoidant reacts to closeness. Even when it's safe, their body screams, "Back away. Protect yourself. Don't get burned again." Here's what often happens next. The partner feels the distance and tries harder. They pursue. They reach. They demand reassurance. But the harder they try, the more the avoidant retreats. Because now, not only does closeness feel overwhelming, the pursuit feels like pressure. And pressure is the one thing they cannot handle. So the dance continues. One partner chases closeness. The other runs from it. Not because they don't care, but because their silent rule says they must. Now, let's talk about the cost. By pulling away when things get real, avoidants miss the very moments that build intimacy. The late-night conversations where trust deepens. The vulnerable confessions that bond hearts. The little acts of leaning on each other that create security. All of those are lost in the name of safety. And so, their relationships often stay shallow. Not because they wanted them to be, but because their rule made it so. But here's the heartbreaking twist. When they pull away, they feel lonely too. They might not admit it. They might tell themselves they're fine. But deep down, there's a hollow ache. Because while distance keeps them safe, it also keeps them isolated. And every time they run, they reinforce the very loneliness they're trying to escape. Picture this. A partner reaches for them in love. They retreat in fear. And then, in the silence of their own space, they wonder why love always feels so far away. It's not because love didn't knock. It's because their rule wouldn't let them open the door. This is why avoidants often have a trail of almost relationships, connections that never reached their full depth, partners who felt shut out, love stories that stayed half-written, because every time things started to get real, the rule pulled them back. So what does this mean? For those who love them, it means the distance isn't about you. It's about their wiring. It's about a survival strategy they don't even know they're following. And until they face that rule, until they realize that closeness can be safe, they'll keep choosing distance, even from the people they love most. The second rule, then, is this. Keep distance when it gets too real. It kept them safe once, but now it keeps them from love. And until it's rewritten, every relationship they enter will be shaped by it. If the second rule was about keeping distance when things get real, the third rule is about keeping yourself hidden when things get vulnerable. The unspoken mantra here is simple. Don't let them see too much of who you really are. Why? Because for the avoidant, exposure feels dangerous. Being known feels like being at risk. Love may demand honesty, but honesty feels like walking into a room without armor. And armor is what kept them alive. Think back to the world they grew up in. In some cases, being themselves. was met with criticism. Their needs were brushed aside. Their feelings were too big, too much, or too inconvenient. So they learned early. Hide what hurts. Hide what you feel. Hide what you want. Because showing yourself only leads to rejection. For others, it wasn't outright criticism. It was absence. Their emotions were simply invisible. Nobody noticed when they were sad. Nobody comforted them when they were afraid. And that silence taught them another version of the same lesson. My inner world doesn't matter. Better to keep it to myself. Fast forward to adulthood. This becomes rule 3. Don't show too much. Keep your real self tucked away. And so, avoidants move through love wearing masks. Masks of competence. Masks of calm. Masks of independence. On the outside, they might look composed, strong, even unbothered. But on the inside, there's a storm no one sees. Here's the painful irony. What most people crave in love is closeness. The kind of closeness that comes from truly knowing each other. But with an avoidant, you often get only fragments. Pieces of them. Carefully measured disclosures. They might share a story about their day, but not the feelings underneath it. They might talk about their work, but not their fears. They might laugh with you, but never cry with you. Because crying would mean exposure. And exposure feels unsafe. Notice the pattern. When you ask, "What's wrong?" they say, "Nothing, I'm fine." When you ask, "What are you feeling?" they shrug, "I don't know." When you want to go deeper, they pivot to the surface. It's not that they don't have answers. It's that the answers feel too risky to give. This rule shows up in subtle ways too. They might keep secrets, not because they're hiding betrayal, but because sharing feels too vulnerable. They might downplay accomplishments, because pride risks being cut down. They might minimize pain, because admitting it would expose weakness. So, the less they show, the safer they feel. But let's be clear, this doesn't mean they don't want to be seen. Deep down, every human being longs for recognition, to be known, to be understood, to be accepted. Avoidants want that too. But the rule whispers louder. Don't show too much. Don't risk it. Don't let them in. Imagine how exhausting this becomes. To constantly monitor yourself. To calculate what's safe to reveal. To keep emotions locked up, behind closed doors. It's like being in a house, with all the lights off. The rooms are full, but nobody sees them. That's what being with an avoidant can feel like. You sense there's so much inside them, but the doors never open wide enough. This rule also affects how avoidants handle conflict. Instead of saying, "That hurt me," they go silent. Instead of admitting, "I need reassurance," they act like they don't care. Instead of showing sadness, they put on indifference. Because to them, showing hurt feels like handing someone a weapon, and they don't trust that it won't be used against them. Here's another layer. Rule 3 doesn't just hide pain. It hides love too. Many avoidants love deeply. They feel care, attachment, even devotion. But instead of saying, "I love you," they might say, "You're all right." Instead of reaching out first, they wait for you to reach for them. Instead of showing tenderness, they keep it locked inside, where it feels safer. So their partners often feel starved for affection, not because love isn't there, but because the rule won't let it show. Think of how tragic that is, to have love inside you, but be too afraid to reveal it, to want closeness, but always hold it back, to long for connection, while convincing yourself you don't need it. That's the quiet torment Rule 3 creates. And it shapes relationships in powerful ways. Their partners often feel like outsiders, always guessing, always wondering, do they really love me? Do they care? Or am I imagining it? Why won't they just open up? The avoidant might think they're protecting themselves, but in the process, they make their partner feel shut out. Here's the deeper cost. Intimacy is built on vulnerability. Without it, love stays thin. You can't build a real relationship on half-truths and hidden feelings. Not for long. And yet, avoidants replay this rule. Again and again. They reveal just enough to keep the connection alive, but never enough to let it fully grow. So, the relationship becomes a house with only one floor. Safe, functional, but never reaching its full height. Let's step into their inner world for a moment. When an avoidant hides themselves, they might feel relief. Good. I didn't say too much. I stayed safe. But later, in private, there's often a pang of regret. Why couldn't I just say what I felt? Why do I always shut down? Why can't I let them see me? Because deep down they know what they're hiding is also what they're hungry for. To be seen, to be known, to be loved for who they really are. This is why avoidants often live with a split identity. The self they show to the world, calm, composed, untouchable, and the self they hide, aching, longing, unsure, tender. It's not that one is fake and the other is real. Both are real, but one is allowed out, and the other stays locked in. And as long as Rule 3 dominates, the hidden self never gets a chance to breathe in love. So what does this mean for relationships? It means partners often have to love an avoidant twice. Once for the person they see, and once for the person they know is hiding. That's a heavy burden, because love shouldn't require decoding. It should be shared openly, freely, fully. But when Rule 3 is in charge, everything becomes a guessing game. Let's be honest. This rule may protect the avoidant from rejection, but it also guarantees loneliness. Because love without vulnerability isn't love, it's a performance. It's safe, yes, but it's also hollow. And sooner or later, partners grow tired of loving someone who won't let themselves be known. The tragedy is that the avoidant isn't cold at all. They're simply hidden. Their feelings are real. Their love is real. Their longings are real. But they've been buried under years of survival. And until the rule is broken, until they risk showing more of themselves, no one gets to touch the depth of who they are. So the third rule is this: don't show too much of yourself. It kept them safe when vulnerability meant pain. But now it keeps them from love. Because to be loved, you have to be seen. And to be seen, you have to be willing to show yourself. That's the truth they've been running from, and the truth that waits for them if they're brave enough to step into the light. If Rule 3 is about hiding yourself, Rule 4 is about hiding your need. The quiet law goes like this: don't depend on anyone too much. Don't lean too hard. Don't trust that they'll stay. For an avoidant, this isn't just a preference. It's survival. Depending on someone feels like handing them the keys to your stability. And that feels unbearably risky. Because in their story, relying on others rarely ended well. Let's return to childhood. Maybe they reached out for comfort, but nobody came. Maybe they asked for help and were told to figure it out. Maybe they needed attention, but instead got silence. Or worse, maybe the person they leaned on used that need against them, shamed them, rejected them, made them feel weak for wanting closeness. So they learned a brutal lesson. Need is dangerous. Dependence is humiliating. Better to take care of myself. That lesson calcified into a rule. And by the time they grow up, it governs every bond they touch. Here's what it looks like in relationships. When love deepens, most people naturally start to rely on each other. They share burdens. They split responsibilities. They count on each other for comfort. But for an avoidant, that's when alarms go off. The moment reliance appears, so does fear. What if they let me down? What if they leave? What if I lean and the ground gives way beneath me? So they do two things. First, they minimize their own needs. They convince themselves they don't actually need much at all. They'll downplay stress, hide exhaustion, pretend they're fine when they're not. Because if you don't ask, you can't be disappointed. Second, they avoid being leaned on too heavily. When a partner turns to them for support, they may withdraw, not because they don't care, but because the weight of someone else's dependence feels overwhelming. It presses against the very rule they live by. Never rely. Never be relied on too much. This is why avoidants often thrive in relationships until dependence grows. At first, things feel light, exciting, safe. But once love starts demanding reliance, the avoidant feels pressure, and pressure feels like danger. So they retreat. Think of how this plays out in small ways. A partner says, "Can you call me if I'm upset?" The avoidant thinks, "What if I can't? What if I fail?" A partner says, "I need you to be there for me." The avoidant hears, "You're responsible for my emotions." Even a simple request, "Can you pick me up?" can trigger a wave of inner resistance. Because every ask feels like a slippery slope toward dependence. It's not that they don't want to give. They often do. But giving feels safer when it's on their terms, not when it's expected. Because expectation feels like a trap. Here's the heartbreaking paradox. Avoidants crave closeness, but they're terrified of dependence. They want connection, but they fear obligation. They want to trust, but they flinch from leaning. So they live in a tension they can never quite escape, longing for love, while resisting the very glue that makes it last. Let's dig deeper. Reliance requires trust, and trust is the one thing their nervous system doesn't want to give away, because trust means surrendering control. And for an avoidant, control equals safety. If they rely, they lose control. If they lose control, they risk pain. So they hold tight to independence, even when it costs them intimacy. Partners often feel this rule acutely. They might notice the avoidant never asks for help, never admits to struggling, never leans in emotionally. And when they themselves lean in, they may feel subtly pushed away. It can leave them wondering, do they even want me here? Do they actually need me? Or am I just extra? That ache is real, because human love thrives on interdependence, the give and take, the leaning and being leaned on. But with an avoidant, that loop is broken. Here's a scene that happens often. A partner gets upset and says, "Why can't you just be there for me?" The avoidant freezes. They want to care. They do care. But the demand feels suffocating. So instead of offering comfort, they shut down, withdraw, or go quiet. The partner feels abandoned. The avoidant feels trapped. Both walk away hurt. This is the hidden cost of Rule 4. It's not just that the avoidant avoids reliance. It's that they also deprive their partner of the comfort of mutual dependence. And over time, this creates a deep imbalance. One person does the leaning, the other holds back. One person opens, the other stays guarded. And slowly, the relationship starts to feel one-sided. Yet here's the tragedy. Avoidants often don't realize how much this costs them. Because in protecting themselves from disappointment, they also cut themselves off from the healing that dependence can bring. True love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means risk. Risk that someone might fail you, but also the chance that they might come through. Without that risk, love never deepens. So Rule 4 builds a lonely fortress. Inside, the avoidant is safe, but they are also alone. Outside, partners knock, but the doors don't open fully. The avoidant may wonder why intimacy always feels strained, why people say they're distant, why love feels heavy. The answer lies here. You cannot build closeness while refusing to rely. Let's picture the inner dialogue of an avoidant. Their partner says, "I need you." Inside, the avoidant feels panic. Need? That's dangerous. If I meet it, I'll feel trapped. If I don't, I'll hurt them. Either way, I lose. So they distance instead, not realizing that in avoiding the loss they fear, they're creating the very loss they dread. And yet, beneath all this fear lies a longing. Because when you strip away the rule, what every avoidant truly wants is what every human being wants: a place to rest, a person to trust, a shoulder to lean on without fear of rejection. But that dream feels dangerous, so they push it down and tell themselves they're fine on their own. But here's the truth: nobody is fine alone, even the strongest. Most independent among us are wired for connection. We need each other, not because we're weak, but because we're human. Love was never designed to be one-sided. It was built to be shared. And until avoidants learn to risk that, to lean as much as they stand, they'll always feel like something is missing. So rule 4 is this: never rely on anyone fully. It kept them safe when leaning led to disappointment. But now, it keeps them cut off from intimacy. Because the only way to truly love and be loved is to let someone hold your weight and trust that they won't let you fall. If you've noticed a pattern by now, each rule avoidants live by is built on one central theme: protection. Rule 1 kept feelings at bay. Rule 2 kept distance safe. Rule 3 kept vulnerability hidden. Rule 4 kept dependence off limits. But this final rule, the unspoken crown of them all, is the deepest, most defining one. It says, never get so attached that leaving becomes impossible. Always stay ready to walk away. At first glance, it sounds cold, unfeeling, even cruel. But for an avoidant, it's not cruelty. It's survival. Because somewhere in their history, love wasn't safe to hold. It was unpredictable, unstable, conditional. Maybe love was given one day and withdrawn the next. Maybe closeness ended in betrayal. Maybe trust was broken by the very people who should have been trustworthy. So they built a strategy: never depend too deeply. Never invest so much that leaving feels impossible. Always keep an exit door unlocked. This is why avoidants can look so detached. When relationships end, it's not that they don't feel pain. It's that they've been practicing this rule for years. They've rehearsed leaving in their minds long before it happens. They've trained themselves to minimize loss by never holding too tightly. So when endings come, they often appear calm, composed, almost untouched. But don't mistake composure for absence of feeling. Beneath the surface, there is pain, but it's muted, controlled, hidden under layers of self-protection. Here's how this rule shows up in real life. A partner says, "Promise me you'll never leave." The avoidant smiles, but says little, not because they don't want to stay, but because promising permanence feels dangerous. To promise forever means surrendering the option of escape. And escape is the one thing they never want to lose. Or picture this: a couple argues. Most people fight for resolution because the bond matters too much to risk losing. But the avoidant? They go quiet, detach, act like it doesn't matter. Not because it doesn't matter, but because in their mind, walking away is always a valid option. And keeping that option open helps them feel safe. This rule is why commitment feels so heavy for avoidants. It's not that they can't commit. They can. But commitment means closing the exit doors. And that feels terrifying, because once the doors close, they risk being trapped. And for someone wired to equate closeness with danger, that trap feels like suffocation. So instead of walking through the door fully, they hover in the doorway, one foot in, one foot out, always halfway ready to leave, just in case. This creates a very particular dynamic in relationships. Partners often feel it, that subtle sense that the avoidant isn't all in. Even during happy times, they might notice a distance, a guardedness. It feels like loving someone who never unpacks their bags. They live with you. They share moments with you. But part of them is always prepared to leave tomorrow. And that quiet readiness creates insecurity. The partner thinks, am I not enough? Why can't they just choose me fully? But for the avoidant, it's not about the partner's worth. It's about their fear of being trapped in pain again. Let's look at the psychology underneath. When a child grows up with unpredictable caregivers, their nervous system learns. Safety doesn't last. Love can vanish. So as adults, they prepare for that vanishing in advance. They tell themselves, if I don't cling too tightly, I won't hurt as badly when it ends. This is why so many avoidants seem calm during breakups. They already rehearsed the leaving long before it happened. But the irony is tragic. By living ready to leave, they never let themselves fully experience the joy of staying. This is the hidden cost of Rule 5. It keeps them safe from devastation, but it also robs them of true intimacy. Because intimacy requires permanence. It requires a sense of, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You can trust me. Without that, love always feels fragile, temporary, conditional. And no matter how good the relationship is, the avoidant never allows themselves to rest fully in it. Imagine being in love, but never exhaling completely, never relaxing into the bond, never trusting it won't vanish. That's the reality of this rule. The avoidant loves, but always with a part of their heart hidden behind the exit door. Partners often describe this as the most painful part. It's not that the avoidant doesn't show love. They do, but there's always a limit, a place they won't go, a depth they won't dive into. And when things get hard, instead of fighting to stay, they seem ready to leave. That readiness feels like rejection, but in truth, it's self-defense. Let's walk through an example. A partner says, I feel like you're pulling away. The avoidant responds, I just need space. The partner hears, I don't want you. But what the avoidant means is, I need to remind myself I can leave if I need to. The space isn't about the partner. It's about reinforcing the rule. That keeps them safe. And yet, this safety has a cost. Because every time they pull away, their partner feels abandoned. Every time they act ready to walk, trust weakens. And over time, the relationship becomes fragile. Not because of betrayal, but because of this ever-present possibility of leaving. Now here's the deepest irony. Avoidants want lasting love. They want stability. They want a bond they can trust. But the very rule they live by, always stay ready to walk away, prevents them from building that stability. Because love can't thrive when one person never fully stays. So what would breaking this rule look like? It would mean daring to close the exit door. To say, I'm here. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. It would mean letting themselves lean fully into love, even when fear whispers otherwise. It would mean risking pain, but also opening the possibility of joy deeper than anything they've known. This isn't easy. It may feel impossible, but the truth is, every rule avoidants live by was written in childhood, when protection was necessary. As adults, those rules no longer serve. They guard against old dangers, but they also block new life. And Rule 5 is the clearest example of that. Because living ready to walk away ensures you never truly arrive. So let's name it plainly. Rule 5. Always stay ready to walk away. It was a shield once. It was armor. It kept heartbreak at a distance. But now, it keeps love itself at a distance too. Because the only way to experience the safety they long for is to risk staying, risk relying, risk letting the door close behind them. Only then can love become a place to rest, not just a room you're ready to exit at any moment. And that is the final truth about the silent rules avoidants live by. They were born to protect, but if never questioned, they end up isolating. Behind each one is a longing for connection and a fear that connection will destroy them. Yet the paradox is this: the very closeness they fear is the very closeness that could heal them. Because at the end of the day, these rules aren't signs of someone who doesn't care. They're signs of someone who learned to survive love before they ever learned to feel safe in it. If this spoke to you, if you've seen yourself in these patterns, or recognized them in someone you love, remember, awareness is the first step toward change. And if you want more guidance on how avoidant patterns play out in real life and how healing is possible, make sure you subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and keep walking with me as we uncover the hidden layers of love and attachment. Because love doesn't have to feel like a rule book. It can feel like home.